Okay, so I did blues repositories and the preservation of blues. So a repository is something like a museum or an archive, anything that keeps memorabilia or anything really important pertaining to a certain subject. And it's important to note that there are traveling exhibitions and permanent exhibitions. And so the things I'll be focusing on are permanent exhibitions, because traveling exhibitions, you can have things that don't necessarily belong to the museum. So I'm going to focus on the things that are kept all the time. So I'm focusing mainly on Mississippi blues museums and archives. Since this is the birthplace of blues, it's really important that we focus on what we have here at home. So this is the Delta Blues Museum. It's in Clarkdale, Mississippi, and it has a pretty vast collection. It's the oldest Mississippi museum, but it has stuff like guitars from musicians like B.B. King, John Lee Hooker, who's also known as the Boogeyman, Big Joe Williams, Jimmy Burns, and Son Thomas. Charlie Musselwhite has his own little thing, his own little collection. It has a piano, some shoes, a signed harmonica. Son Thomas has some sculptures in there along with his guitar. So a woman in a coffin and a skull are there. And then some signs from important blues joints in the state of Mississippi. So a juke joint called Three Forks, they have their sign, and then the Clack grocery sign. Then there's the B.B. King Museum. It's in Indianola, Mississippi. So it's kind of set up like you're walking through B.B.'s life. So it sets up Delta blues and blues culture in the Delta, and then it introduces B.B. and how he influenced it, how he got to Memphis, and then how it ultimately impacted his career and how he became a blues icon instead of just a musician. So they have things like photos, guitars, awards, records, record players, clothing, cameras. They had recording equipment, like there's a whole mock room that you can see up there. The Blues Archive at Ole Miss is really cool. I actually got to go and talk to Greg Johnson, who's that guy in the picture on the bottom there, and we talked about all kinds of stuff that's in the Blues Museum, or not museum, archive, and how he preserves those things and what happens if they're not preserved. So they have commercially produced media, which he calls catalog materials, which is sound recordings, 70 RPM records, books, movies, DVDs, cassette tapes, anything that's meant to go out to the public. And then he has, what did he call it? He called it archival materials, so special books, and then correspondence between record companies and musicians, recording contracts, royalty statements, and of course photos, flyers, non-commercial recordings, and Victrolas and record players. So he said how things are chosen is based on their budget and resources. So if they can't preserve something, they're not going to take it on. They'll refer people to someone else who can take care of it, so that they can preserve that memorabilia and preserve the blues better. So the things that aren't preserved, he said, really just depends on who's taking care of it. So if it's out in the elements, it'll be exposed to bugs, UV, and it can just destroy the entire thing. A lot of paper was acidic back then, so that can destroy it too. So how things are preserved: the film, records, and cassette tapes are actually kept in an annex separate from the archives in a cold room at 40 degrees Fahrenheit with industrial dehumidifier and minimum UV radiation. And some are kept in a freezer at -3 degrees until money comes along so that they can update what they have in their archives. More on that in a second. Wood, paper, and wood products are actually kept in acid-free boxes so that they don't ruin the paper, since it was acidic back then. They also remove staples and paper clips so that there's no rust. And memorabilia such as Victrolas and record players, he just stresses, like, don't touch them, just ask for my help. And lastly, do things stay forever valuable, or do they become outdated? He said that some forms of recording may become outdated and they have to update those, like cassette tapes, but just the documents themselves and the music itself is important to understanding blues culture, because it's forever going to be relevant. And it's really cool just to hold something and be like, this is how it was originally recorded. And so he thinks it's really important, I think it's really important, that those originals are kept so that we can understand how music was recorded. But it, technology may become outdated, but blues will never be outdated.